Every time we had Sunday brunch at my fiancé's parents' house, I'd black out cold by dessert and wake up with my cardigan buttoned wrong and my hair pulled loose from its clip, but my fiancé just blamed it on low blood sugar. Then I hid my phone under the couch cushion and recorded the truth. My future brother-in-law telling someone to keep my eyes open long enough for the facial scan to clear on my work laptop. Before I get into this, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to fight your way out of a family that smiled at you while robbing you blind, hit subscribe, because this story is going to make your blood boil. My name's Riley, I'm 29, and I work as a fraud examiner for a regional bank holding company outside Charlotte, North Carolina. It's not glamorous work. Mostly it's spreadsheets and red flags and learning to trust numbers more than people. I grew up in Hickory, a couple hours west, in a house where my mom clipped coupons and my dad drove a delivery route for 22 years before his knees gave out. I put myself through East Carolina with a patchwork of grants, loans, and a part-time job at a credit union that turned into the career I have now. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because it matters later. Because everything that happened to me happened because of where I came from, not in spite of it. I met Adrian Caldwell at a fundraiser gala for financial literacy in young adults, of all places. He was tall, easy with a joke, the kind of charming that doesn't feel like a performance until you've known someone long enough to realize it is one. His family who was old Charlotte money. Not flashy, but the quiet kind that owns half a block downtown and never has to say so. His father, Walton Caldwell, ran a private wealth management firm that had been in the family for 3 generations. His mother, Celeste, did philanthropy, which I came to learn meant she sat on boards and made other women feel small at luncheons. Adrian had a younger sister, Margot, who worked, loosely, for the family firm, and an older brother-in-law, Desmond, who'd married into the family 5 years before me and seemed to have made himself indispensable in ways nobody quite explained. For the first 8 months, it was good. Better than good. Adrian made me feel like the parts of myself I'd always sanded down to fit into rooms, the accent that crept out when I was tired, the instinct to check a price tag before I looked at the item, were things he actually liked about me. He proposed on a Tuesday, no fanfare, just the two of us on his balcony with cheap champagne, because he said the expensive stuff didn't taste different anyway. I believed for a while that I'd found someone who saw past where I came from. The Sunday dinners started right after the engagement. Every week, without fail, at the Caldwell house in Eastover, a brick colonial with white columns and a circular driveway that always had at least one car nicer than anything I'd ever sat in. Celeste would ask, every single time, in that syrup and vinegar voice, how my parents were doing, whether my mother had ever thought about doing something more with her life. I'd smile and change the subject. Adrian never noticed or never said anything if he did. It was the 4th dinner after the engagement when it started. We'd just finished the entree, some kind of herb-crusted lamb I barely touched because my stomach had been doing something strange since the appetizer, when the room tilted sideways, not dizzy tired, wrong tired. Like someone had reached into my skull and turned a dial. I remember setting down my fork very carefully, the way you do when you're trying to look normal and failing. I remember Adrian's hand on my back, his voice sounding like it was coming through water. Then nothing. I woke up on the leather sofa in the Caldwell's second living room, the one they called the den, though it was bigger than my childhood living room and kitchen combined. My mouth was dry as chalk. The chandelier light felt like it was drilling into my eyes. And when I sat up, my cardigan, which I distinctly remembered buttoning correctly that morning, because I always check, it's a habit from years of dressing for client meetings, was off by one button, the collar twisted, my hair half out of its clip, and pushed back from my face in a way I never wear it. Adrian came in a minute later with a glass of water, all soft concern. "You scared us," he said. "You just kind of went out at the table." "Margot carried you in here." I asked how long I'd been out. He said maybe 20 minutes, that I'd probably just been overworked, dehydrated, that I needed to take better care of myself. I wanted to believe him, God, I wanted to, but 20 minutes doesn't misbutton a cardigan. 20 minutes doesn't loosen a hair clip that's been in since 7 that morning. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself for 3 more dinners, actually, because the alternative, that something was being done to me in his parents' house with his family standing around, was too large a thing to hold. But it kept happening, every Sunday. Always after the entree, always before dessert, like clockwork, and every time I woke up a little more wrong than I'd gone under. Once my watch had been moved to the other wrist, once my shoes were off and placed neatly by the door, soles facing out, like someone had taken care to make it look deliberate. The week everything cracked open started on a Wednesday, 3 days before that Sunday's dinner. I got a call from my IT department at the bank, a flag on my company laptop, an attempted login outside business hours from a residential IP address in Eastover. Eastover, the Caldwell's neighborhood. The system had blocked it because facial recognition failed twice in a row before the attempt timed out. I sat in my car in the bank parking garage for 20 minutes after that call, doing the math my training had taught me to do automatically. Someone had my laptop, someone needed my face, eyes open, to get into it. And the only place that laptop had been unattended, even for a few minutes, was at Sunday dinner while I was unconscious on that sofa. I didn't say anything to Adrian. I want to be honest with you about what I did instead, because some of you are going to think it was reckless, and you'd be right. But I needed to know the shape of what I was dealing with before I trusted anyone, including the man I was supposed to marry, with what I knew. I bought a small audio recorder, the kind real estate agents use for walkthroughs, no bigger than a tube of lipstick, and I started carrying it in my bra on Sundays. The following week, I excused myself to the bathroom before the entree arrived and tucked it into the seam of the den sofa cushion, the one I always seemed to wake up on, like it had been chosen for me. That dinner went exactly like the others. The fog came down right after the lamb. I woke up on the sofa, cardigan wrong, hair loose, mouth full of cotton. But this time, hidden in the cushion 2 feet from where my body had been lying, a recorder was running. I didn't listen to it until I was home, alone, door locked, in my own apartment in South End where nobody could see my face while I did it. And when I pressed play, I heard Desmond, my soon-to-be brother-in-law, the one nobody could quite explain, say, low and businesslike, keep her chin up, her eyes need to stay open at least 4 seconds for the scan to clear. The system logs failed attempts and we don't have many left before it locks for good. Then Margot's voice, irritated, she's heavier than she looks, just prop the pillow under her neck. And then, this is the part that broke something in my chest that I don't think fully healed. Celeste's voice. Calm as a hostess discussing centerpieces. Once we're into the audit trail, we need maybe an hour. Walton says the firm's exposure goes back 4 years if the regulators get there first. Just keep her under. I sat on my kitchen floor at 1 in the morning and listened to that recording 9 times. I am a fraud examiner. I have spent my entire career listening to people justify theft to themselves in small, reasonable voices. I know what it sounds like when people don't think they're doing anything wrong. What I heard on that recording was a family that had spent 4 years skimming client funds at Caldwell Wealth Management. Walton's firm, the one that managed retirement accounts for teachers and machinists and small business owners across 3 counties, and had recently learned, somehow, that the bank where I worked had flagged irregular transfer patterns connected to several of their largest accounts. My bank. My investigation queue. They didn't need me. They needed my laptop, my login, my access to see how close the net had drawn before they moved the money somewhere the regulators couldn't follow. I didn't go to the police that night. I know how that sounds, given everything I do for a living, given that I tell people in trainings every quarter to report the moment they suspect something. But understand, I had no proof of who had drugged me, only proof of what they planned to do with me unconscious. A recording of a conversation doesn't show whose hand held the syringe or slipped the powder into the wine. I needed more, and I needed it documented in a way that would survive a defense attorney tearing it apart. So the next morning, I drove myself to an urgent care clinic across town, told them I'd had an unexplained blackout, and asked for a full toxicology panel. The results came back 5 days later, trace levels of a benzodiazepine completely inconsistent with anything I'd been prescribed or had ever taken in my life. I made copies of the copies. I started keeping a written log dated and timestamped of every Sunday, every blackout, every strange detail I woke up to. Then I went to my supervisor at the bank, not as Adrian's fiancé, but as Riley Bennett, fraud examiner, and told her I had reason to believe a client relationship, Caldwell Wealth Management, had a compliance issue that intersected with my personal life in a way that created a conflict of interest. I asked to be walked off the account and for the matter to be referred to our internal investigations unit, and separately, given what I now suspected about the drugging, to law enforcement. She didn't hesitate. Within 2 days, I was sitting across from a detective and an assistant district attorney, laying out 4 years of statements, the toxicology report, and the audio file, while a forensic analyst from my own bank cross-referenced account numbers I'd already half memorized from my queue. Here's where I want to be honest about the part of me that almost ruined everything. 3 weeks into the investigation, before any arrests, before any warrants, Adrian and I had dinner, just the two of us, away from his family, at a quiet restaurant near my apartment. And some reckless, wounded, 29-year-old part of me, the part that still wanted him to be the man I thought I'd fallen in love with, wanted to give him a chance to choose me. I told him what I knew. I told him about the recorder, the recording, the talk screen. I watched his face go through something I still can't fully name. Not shock, not the shock of a man hearing this for the first time, but the particular stillness of someone doing math. He told me I needed to delete the recording, that I didn't understand what I was about to destroy, that his family had people who handled things like this. And in that stillness, I understood that he had known. Maybe not from the beginning, maybe not every detail, but he had known enough, for long enough, to choose his family's silence over my safety every single Sunday. I want every person reading this who's ever been told they were being dramatic or paranoid by someone who claimed to love them to hear this part clearly. I left that restaurant, drove straight to the detective handling my case, and told her everything Adrian had just said. She told me, gently, that I'd taken a real risk telling him before the warrants were finalized, that families like the Caldwells had a way of moving money and memories overnight when they sensed exposure. For the next 11 days, I barely slept. I changed the locks on my apartment, stayed with my college roommate, and waited. The arrests happened on a Friday morning, coordinated between the district attorney's office and the SEC's regional office, which had been quietly building its own case against Caldwell Wealth Management for almost a year before my report gave them the missing piece connecting the embezzlement to an active attempt to obstruct a federal financial investigation. Walton was charged with securities fraud and wire fraud spanning 4 years and an estimated $11 million in misappropriated client funds. Celeste and Desmond were both charged as co-conspirators for their roles in the scheme, including the drugging. A count of administering a controlled substance without consent, layered on top of the financial charges. Margot took a plea deal in exchange for testimony, which still makes my stomach turn, because cooperating after the fact doesn't undo holding a pillow under my neck while I was unconscious. Adrian was never charged criminally. Knowing isn't the same as doing, legally speaking, and he'd technically never laid a hand on me or the laptop, but he lost everything else. The engagement obviously ended the night I drove away from that restaurant. His name was dragged through every regional business outlet covering the case. The firm his family had built over 3 generations was liquidated to begin repaying victims, dozens of regular families whose retirement accounts had been quietly bled for years by people who hosted galas for financial literacies while doing the opposite behind closed doors. The hardest part of this story, the part I still think about more than the drugging, more than the betrayal, is a phone call I got from my own mother about a month after the arrests made the news. She called not to ask if I was okay, but to ask carefully whether any of that settlement money might be coming my way since I'd been so close to the family. I sat with that question for a long time before I answered her. I told her no, there was no settlement coming to me, and that I needed her to understand the difference between a daughter who survived something and a daughter who profited from it. It's strange. I went looking for the kind of family I never had growing up, the kind with the big house and the easy money, and what I found instead was a brutal, expensive lesson that the people who actually love you don't need a chandelier to prove it. I testified at the federal sentencing hearing 8 months later in a courtroom in downtown Charlotte, 2 rows behind a dozen elderly clients of Caldwell Wealth Management who'd lost portions of retirement savings they could never fully rebuild at their age. When the judge asked if I had anything to add before sentencing, I stood up, and for the first time in over a year I said all of it out loud in front of Walton, Celeste, and Desmond, in front of everyone. The dinners, the recorder, the toxicology report, the night Adrian asked me to delete the truth instead of choosing me. Walton wouldn't look at me. Celeste stared at a fixed point on the wall behind the judge's bench the entire time. I watched Desmond's jaw tighten with every sentence, and somewhere around the part where I described waking up with my shoes placed neatly by the door, soles facing out, like a small cruel joke only they understood, his composure finally broke, and he put his head down and didn't lift it again. I left that courthouse and didn't look back once. I work a different account portfolio now, one with no ties to old Charlotte money or anyone's last name carrying more weight than their behavior. I still go to brunch on Sundays sometimes, but these days it's with my college roommate and my mother, who, to her credit, has never asked about settlement money again. And every single time the waiter sets down my plate, I make sure I'm the one who decides when the meal is over.